Hello and welcome to Lunchtime Politics on Channels Television. I'm Millicent Walker. On the news this hour, 319 Nigerians to be evacuated from South Africa on Tuesday, 17th of September 2019, as federal government promises to improve arrangement for the evacuees. As Catholic bishops gather to deliberate affairs of the nation, the Ogun State governor asked Nigerians to pray for peace and unity of the country. And the federal government received reports of the Police Reform Implementation Committee. The task of domesticating it gets different reactions. What are the rules of engagement for community policing? We find out. Welcome everyone to the program. We begin with the news briefing by the Chairman, Nigerians in Diaspora Commission, NIDCOM, Honorable Abike Era, on the evacuation arrangement of Nigerians stranded in South Africa amidst attacks on foreign nationals. 187 Nigerians had returned on the September in an arrangement marred by delays resulting from registration and documentation hitches. That's about the 11th of September. The federal government is set to evacuate the next batch, 319 Nigerians, with a promise to tidy up the evacuation process. We'll be touching base with our correspondent for more details on that briefing. Elsewhere, the Bishops' Conference of Nigeria has called on the federal government to intensify the process of national peace and unity and ensure equity as well as fairness and national development. They made the call in Abeokuta, the Ogun State capital, during the second plenary of the Catholic Bishops' Conference held in the state capital. Addressing the gathering, the governor of Ogun State, Mr. Dapo Abiodun, asked the church to continue to be the conscience of the nation, to pray for her unity, her development, and more life abundance.
The church is enjoined to work harder in its responsibilities by condemning the use of violence by individuals or groups to seek redress. Lessons should be learned from the various violent situations in the country. As the body of Christ, I urge us all to rise to the challenges of our time and sincerely offer ourselves to the service of God, sacrifice to our nation, and sincere love to all our fellow human beings. No sacrifice could be greater than the one paid by our Savior on the cross of Calvary. By exhibiting the attributes of genuine love, our work as Christians will become complete and acceptable. Above all, our Heavenly Father expects us to live with others in love.
Staying with security, 30 is the number of kidnapped victims that have been released to the Katsina state government. This brings all the number to 45 persons released so far by bandits as the ongoing peace deal enters its third week. Addressing the returnees, Governor Aminu Masari assured them that the government would continue to convince the bandits to release all those still in captivity.
As the ongoing peace deal between the Katsina state government and repentant bandits enters its third week, another set of 30 victims of kidnapping, mostly women and children, have been released by their abductors. Among the victims is a 52-year-old married woman, Zinatu Sani, from Kankara local government area. Zinatu, while narrating her ordeal in local language, stressed that she was picked from her matrimonial home with two of her children.
Ina farin cikin wannan rana da Allah ya gwada mu muka hito. Allah ya sa muka samu waɗanda suka ji kanmu suka yi mana hanya. Allah ya hiddo mu wannan wuri. Kwanan mu 55 a wurin. Muna samun abinci amma dai ba daɗi. Daga ruwa sai gishiri haka nan muke cin shi.
These victims of kidnap are reported to have been sleeping without a roof on their head, no matter the rains or heat during the day. Addressing the victims, Governor Aminu Masari reassures them that the state government will continue to persuade the suspected bandits to release more of the kidnapped people until everyone in captivity is freed. He directs the victims to be taken to the hospital for checkup before reuniting them with their families. He announced that the state government had equally released 20 suspected bandits earlier apprehended and detained by security operatives in Katsina, Kaduna and Kano states to ensure speedy release of the remaining captives in the custody of the kidnappers.
In continuation of our peace efforts in trying to rescue our people that have been under captivity for a very long time, and we will continue the process until all the people from Katsina State and those that our hands can reach have been freed from the bandits' detention camps.
Although these kidnapped victims claim to have left several orders behind in the grip of the abductors, it is reported that no fewer than 40 Katsina residents are still in the bandits' nets.
Well, let's get back to our correspondent on the evacuation arrangement of Nigerians stranded in South Africa. We have our correspondent, Kayla Megwa. Kayla, can we confirm that the problems that delay the remaining Nigerians from coming home has been sorted?
Hi. Okay, so we haven't started the press briefing yet. We are at the Nigerian in Diaspora Commission headed by Honorable Abike Dabiri. Now, we have quite a lot of questions for her. Today's press briefing is supposed to be an update on the evacuation of the voluntary evacuation of Nigerians from South Africa. But there are lots of questions that are still pending. One of those questions is, what's the deal here? Are they allowed to go back to South Africa in a few weeks' time or months' time? There's a story out there that those who have been evacuated will not be back to South Africa for the next 10 years. We want clarification on that. We also need a clarification on what the delay was. The last evacuation, 187 people were brought back, but it took a long time for them to come back to the country. Immigration issues, there were issues about documentation. So we want to find out what the actual bottlenecks were then and what the bottlenecks, what other bottlenecks they'll be expecting. We also need to know when the next batch of Nigerians will be brought in from South Africa. Questions about the compensation of people who were victims of the alleged xenophobic attacks. We would like to hear how far the Commission has gone in ensuring that those compensations are being paid. And we also have a few questions about the talks between Nigeria and South Africa. The envoy that was sent by Mr. Cyril Ramaphosa. We also want to find out what message they have for Nigerians. We're about to go into the conference room for that press conference, and we'll be getting those details for you and making sure she answers those questions.
All right, we'd like to thank you so much, Kayla, and indeed expect that those questions will be answered. Thank you. Well, now, against the rising wave of insecurity across the country, former Deputy Inspector General of Police, retired DG Habila Joshak, has lent his voice among those calling for community policing. Let's take a listen to him.
Community policing is a philosophy that emphasizes partnership. It emphasizes bottom to top solution. It is a policy that entails that police officers must collaborate with members of the public from the point of planning and to execution. In other words, it is a two-way kind of policing that must involve the community they are policing. The community they are policing will identify, along with the police officers, what the security challenges in that community are, and then solution to solve them. It's an open policy where the community will build trust into the police, and the police also will be seen to be doing the bidding of members of the community.
While there is that debate on community policing in Taraba State, the government is taking a step further, and this is in its commitment to finding a lasting solution to the persistent clashes between the Tiv and Jukun people of the state. Now, to achieve this, the government continued to build on the recent meeting between the governors of Benue and Taraba in the nation's capital. And after a closed-door security meeting, the deputy governor explained that some of the measures being put in place to achieve peace in the communities. Here's what he had to say.
We have resolved that a committee will be set off beginning from Monday. We'll start meeting 15 people from the Jukun side, and then 15 from the Tif side. We'll start meeting with them so that we can find solution, because we believe that these two tribes have been living together peacefully, and we believe that they will continue to be living peacefully. That is one. Another issue that was discussed at the security meeting is the issue of kidnapping and the banditry. As a result of the meeting decided and then took decision that a committee, a joint patrol team will be set up involving all the security agencies in the state. And the meeting too have decided that there will be some dedicated lines so that citizens of Taraba State will be able to, if anybody is in distress, will be able to call that number, and then the security agencies will be able to respond as quickly as possible. Another issue we discussed at the security meeting is the issue of the boundary issue, because we believe that once we solve the issue of the boundary between Benue and Taraba State, we will reduce minimally, we will reduce the conflict, we will reduce the issue of banditry, we will reduce the issue of kidnapping.
And away from security, the Attorney General of the Federation, Mr. Abubakar Malami, says there are not many options before the federal government in connection with the Process and Industrial Developments Limited P&ID case. According to him, the case should have been appealed by lawyers engaged by the immediate past administration of President Goodluck Jonathan. The Attorney General says that President Muhammadu Buhari-led administration had, at a point, considered engaging P&ID in negotiations, despite doubts about the contract's authenticity. He also says the Buhari-led administration could not do much since an award had been established since the beginning of the administration. A British court had awarded a judgment of $9.6 billion against Nigeria over claims that the country did not meet its own obligation of a 20-year gas supply and processing agreement. To discuss more on this, we have legal practitioners in Abuja studios, Ofonome Eno and also Aliyu Abdullahi, who is also the Vice Chairman, Buhari Media Group. We'd like to thank you, gentlemen, for joining us.
Thank you for having us.
All right, my first question would be to the Vice Chairman of the Buhari Media Group, and that is, from the last press briefing of the Attorney General of the Federation, will the federal government be appealing, or will they be negotiating to pay the $9.6 billion?
Thank you, Millicent, for having me. I don't think the federal government will be negotiating with P&ID. Rather, they will be appealing, and they will try to establish a case of fraud of an issue from the contract, award of contract. And I think what Malami, the statement issued by Malami with regards to why the government actually continued or started with negotiation in 2015 was he was giving a historical background to what they met on ground as at 2015. But since then, so many information has come to light. Some actors that were supposed to have known some of these things during when the contract was awarded in 2010 or so, a former Attorney General inclusive didn't know the existence of this contract. So many due process were bypassed, like the Infrastructure Regulatory Commission approval was not met. Neither was the Federal Executive Council aware of this contract. But nevertheless, what this government is saying, the government that came after the late Umaru Musa Yar'Adua's government, that is the government of former President Jonathan, continued to negotiate, and they even actually have lawyers to represent the country. So they felt, as at that time, since the award has already been made, there was nothing they could do. But now, because of the penalty, the heavy burden that Nigeria is facing with, the country has to look inward and find how do we get out of this. So if there are evidence of fraud and so some collusion from both within Nigeria and from the P&ID side, then I think the country will do everything possible to appeal that judgment and also to see if they can even file a suit against the Nigerian collaborators and also P&ID. Because if you come to a country to get an award of contract, you have to know.
Abdullahi, we'll come back to
ignorance is
talk
not an
about
excuse.
some of the historical background you've mentioned, and we'll also, when we return, come to Mr. Eno to also give his thoughts about if we can establish fraud or crime as a basis to appeal this matter. Also, still to come, Nigeria's UN representative to assume the General Assembly. We'll bring you those details when we return. Welcome back to the program. Still talking about the failed P&ID contract, and we've been talking to Fonime Eno, legal practitioner, and also Aliyu Abdullahi, who's also a legal practitioner and the Vice Chairman, Buhari Media Group. Thank you for your patience, gentlemen. Let's go to you, Mr. Eno. Do you think that the federal government can establish fraud or crime as a way of setting aside this award?
Well, looking back at the case, it is very obvious that there were some foul play right from the establishment of the company, P&ID. Now, P&ID wasn't incorporated in Nigeria, even though it later had its own subsidiary here. That's one. Two, the characters that promoted this company to a large level, were largely unknown, or were known in around government circles to be of shady characters. Three, the Federal Executive Council wasn't brought to the know of this huge amount of money involved in this contract. And lastly, if the comments by the former Attorney General is anything to go by, then one would question why the Office of the Attorney General didn't have its input in a contract that was signed by the Ministry of Petroleum on behalf of the federal government. These issues can establish to a large extent the existence of fraud. And so, even though we have been the federal government is out of time to appeal this award, it can also use its discretionary powers to investigate the contents of this contract and bring the principal practitioners in this matter to book. Now, they can also use this as a basis for negotiation with the company.
When you hear
reduction of this award.
Hold on a moment. When you hear a statement that lawyers engaged by the immediate past administration of former President Goodluck Jonathan saying that they didn't have time, or rather laying the blame with regards to what they didn't do, what does this tell you?
Well, what one can deduce from these comments are that the process of transition from one government to the other somehow affected the management of this case. Why? Because we've been meant to understand that this issue, the award, was already being negotiated negotiated downward by the government of President Goodluck Jonathan, and it was part and parcel of his handover notes to Mr. President. Now, the Office of the Attorney General, maybe by virtue of the fact that appointments as at that time didn't come as fast as it came this time around, maybe there was a mismanagement somewhere. Which lawyer was at that time under the obligation to appeal that award, and who handled that matter after the current administration came into, was sworn in, is also an issue to look at, because the management of a brief or of a case on behalf of, as a practitioner lawyer on behalf of a client, takes diligence. So somewhere along the line, because of virtue of the transition, I think that this issue suffered a setback in terms of case management.
Let's get in Mr.
Now,
Abdullahi's thoughts on that. And Mr. Abdullahi, the question really is, because there is the P&ID Facts, which is a website published August the 30th, and they actually said this is called the Nigerian Attorney General's Revisionist History. And they said that the P&ID offered to settle the dispute with the Nigerian government for less than the $9.6 billion. And this was after President Jonathan indicated at the time that they were handing over negotiations to the incoming Buhari administration, May the 3rd, 2015. That's their claim.
See, Millicent, let me tell you something. I think a lot of people in position of authority, those ones that are supposed to look after us as a country, they fail to do that, simply put. That's the truth of the matter. I mean, we knew, that the government of Eradua was the one that actually issued this contract. I mean, some people, the right people didn't know. The Attorney General then didn't know. A lot of number of people said they didn't know. Even the Special Advisor on Economic and Gas Matters didn't know. But what should have the government of Jonathan do? What should they have done when they come and inherited that issue? They should have, from that moment when they decided to enter arbitration, they should have objected, to the validity of that contract. Because let me even tell you one thing: arbitral awards are not subject of appeal. You don't appeal arbitral awards. But the judgment that come after, you can appeal that judgment because it's a court judgment. So now the government didn't do that then, the government of Jonathan. Now this government came in. I think they were slow in also on trying to understand the issues surrounding to the fraud and so on. And they decided to play to the ostrich by not engaging or giving the matter the attention that it really needed. So now we are in the position we are. But I don't think there is any wrong time for the government, for Nigeria, to try and establish a case of fraud.
We'd like to thank you. Wish we had more time, but we know this is an issue we'll continue to talk on. Ofonime Eno, Aliyu Abdullahi, thank you, gentlemen, for joining us on the program.